This is Omar for BoxNation. Fortunately, we learnt some very sad news this morning. The legend George Foreman, one of the greatest sportsmen America's ever produced, let alone fighters, tragically passed away at 76 years old today. So obviously, our thoughts, as does the rest of the boxing communities and the world, really goes out to George's family and loved ones. Gareth, you had the honour of interviewing him quite a few times, and I've seen you say on your social media that his presence and aura filled up the room. Just talk to me about your memories on a personal level with Big George.
Yeah, very sad day, Umar. Nice to see you. Have literally woken up to incredibly busy, bombarded morning, and very saddened by this. I spoke to George last a few months ago on the 50th anniversary of the Rumble in the Jungle in October, for a piece, um, kindly organised by Bill Kaplan, his PR guy, and his one of his sons, George, of whom there are five called George, of course. Um, Very saddened by it because George was a huge character, a big booming laugh, an incredible fighter, but a brilliant human being. And obviously, I don't come from the era when I was covering the Rumble in the Jungle in the 70s, 74, 75, when he fought in Jamaica and he fought in Venezuela and Caracas, when he fought in Zaire, Kinshasa, when he fought Norton, when he fought Frazier, and he just absolutely eviscerated them. You got to remember what this guy achieved as a boxer. First of all, he won the Olympic, like you said, rightly said, in America. He's one of their greatest athletes. Won the Olympic gold for them in Mexico in 1968 as a real neophyte boxer, rather like Anthony Joshua did in London, where he hadn't had much of a career. You think after that he turns pro, he beats Foreman. Sorry, he
Frazier.
beats he beats Frazier, he beats Norton, and then he gets beaten by Ali. He's like Deontay Wilder and Mike Tyson rolled into one at the time. He's just destroying everyone. He's one of the biggest punchers of all time. Um, I have interviewed him. I don't know how many times I interviewed him. Many, many, many times, and always through Bill Kaplan, his PR guy, who was his PR guy from the age of him being 18. And Bill's in his late 80s, and still PRing him to this day, this very day. It's a really sad thing because, like you say, what I wrote earlier on was that he filled up a room, big booming laugh, but not trying to command attention, just old and wise and having lived a life, being plummeted the depths because of the loss to Ali, where he hid in a hotel room in Paris for 2 weeks and couldn't show his face, thought he couldn't go back to America. Absolutely unique as a fighter with those big fists and body filling the ring. No one, certainly not in the heavyweight division, I can't remember in any other division, retired and came back 20 years later after losing the world title to win the world title again at 45 and then holding it till he was 46 and 169 days. I know all these details. I've been going over it and writing it this morning. But I remember when Joshua lost his way against Ruiz, he gave brilliant advice. When he talked about being heavyweight champion of the world, he said a microphone is like a weapon of mass destruction when you're the heavyweight champion of the world. You know what he means by that. There's no college degree, there's no book on being heavyweight champion of the world. And I think he felt thrust into the limelight early on. You may have seen the biopic on his life recently, which is extraordinary how he met the right people, how he last October I interviewed him, and I'd never spoken to him about this before. On the eve of the 50th anniversary of the Rumble in the Jungle, the most watched fight of all time, where he talked about when he lost to Ali and he hid in the hotel room, then he went back home. You know, his next fight was against five men in a night in
Yeah,
Montreal. He fought
yeah.
five in a night, and he was going. I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I needed to prove that I still had all that strength in me." And he said, when I fought Evander Holyfield and I lost to him in 1991, I might have lost, but I knew I could still win the world title back. So, and I think he was 41 then, or 43. He's just an incredible specimen. Like if he was an animal, he'd be an elephant, you know, because he's just got that. He's an immovable object, you know. But he made you, I don't know if you ever interviewed George in your time, but
Unfortunately, not. No.
no, he made you feel special whenever you spoke to him. He loved talking wisdom because he was a preacher for so long. I don't know if you know this, but he had his own church where he preached in Houston, Texas. Yeah. He used to go there. The congregation would come to hear him preach. He wasn't that kind of growling menace that fought Ali back in the 70s and beat up all those first 40 opponents to go undefeated with like 90% knockout ratio. He became like Ali was as a talker. He put his faith out there and espoused it. I just think he was an incredible human being. Wouldn't surprise me if America creates a George Foreman Day.
But you know about when you said, have you ever interviewed him? Someone asked me a month ago, a few weeks ago, is there anyone in boxing that you haven't interviewed yet that you'd like to? And honestly, I said George Foreman. And I said that because when you think of iconic moments
Yeah.
in sporting history, not just boxing, what he did against Michael Moorer, that stands out. Obviously, the fight with Muhammad Ali, which was arguably Ali's most iconic moment as well, knocking him out in the Rumble in the Jungle. And also the win over Joe Frazier, putting him down 6 times. Joe Frazier was the most feared man on earth.
He was undefeated. He was undefeated. He'd beaten Ali.
Yeah.
He was undefeated. He was Foreman. Foreman was 34-0. Frazier was 29-0, and he didn't just beat him, he knocked him down 6 times in 2 rounds. You've seen the fight, I'm sure. I mean, he just literally bulldozes him. He
One of the
makes him look
best,
like a middleweight.
one of the best heavyweight performances in history.
Well, it just signaled that everyone feared him. Remember, they thought he was going to kill Ali because Ali, at the age of 32, was
Yeah.
too old to be going in with this guy. That it's a bit like when I'm trying to think the comparison. Really, I don't know if we've got one today. We haven't really. Um, I just think he's incomparable in a way. And you know what? There's another thing about him, and this staggered me as well. He told me this a few years ago. His screensaver on his computer in his office is Ali standing over him in the Rumble in the Jungle. He says, just a reminder when it flicks back on that you can be put on your backside at any moment. Humility. He had humility. He had great grace. Look what he did with the Foreman grill. That made him famous as well. I mean, sold that for over 100 million US dollars, the rights to it in 1999. Just so many things. And I always remember saying he's got a blessed life. He was blessed to be associated with Ali. He said, even if I'd beaten Ali, they would have stepped over me to kiss him. You know, it's so humble. I'm so honored that I had the time I had with him and the times I had on the phone with him. And again, you'd have loved interviewing him. He was a quotes machine. Like when you transcribe people, sometimes they're not. They don't. He wrote his own. The stories wrote themselves every time you interviewed him. And I would like to point people towards an article I've written about meeting George several times in the Telegraph today, because there's loads of anecdotes in there about the things he said. He's just brilliant, brilliant person, special human being, fourth greatest heavyweight of all time for me.
Him and Ali, of course, were fierce rivals, but as they grew older, they became very close to each other, and yeah, they kind of almost loved each other in a way for what they did for each other. Did George ever open up to you about his relationship in the end with Muhammad Ali? You
We
did?
fought in '74. It's in my piece today.
Oh.
That was a long time ago. After 1981, we became the best of friends. By 1984, we loved each other.
Mm.
I'm not closer to anyone else in this life than I am to Muhammad Ali. Why? We were forged by that first fight in Zaire, and our lives are indelibly linked by memories and photographs. As young men and old men, we have a love for each other. Boxing was such a small part of what he could do. I remember when I won the championship of the world, we didn't want to be called champion. What we really wanted was to be the guy who beat Muhammad Ali. We wanted that more than to be champion of the world. But really, nobody could beat Muhammad Ali. Even when you beat him, people said you hadn't really beaten him. Nobody would say that he's lost. And they say they wanted to get his autograph and get the chance to get hugged and kissed by him. And I've said today at the end of my piece, perhaps the two great men are sitting side by side reminiscing today. R.I.P. Big George Foreman, one of the greats forever.
Listen, I think that's a perfect note to end it on. I don't really want to discuss any other topics on this interview because, yeah,
Now, it wouldn't be right.
this is just about the big man himself, and he's up there now with Ali, with Frazier, with Norton in a better place. So, yeah, as I said at the
The
start,
only one that's left from that era and they didn't fight each other is Larry Holmes,
mm,
you know? And I would say, I know people like to comment and talk shit on the comments and all those kind of things. Tell your Foreman stories on the comments under this story because everybody's got a Foreman story. Like everyone's got an Ali story. He came to the UK many times. He came over here sometimes. He's a special guy and he's special in a lot of people's hearts. And I hope today people put comments in there about their memories of him and of his fights. Because what a life. What a life. And taken quite young, in my view, because he always seemed younger than his years when I met him as well.
Gareth, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, my brother.